Bates Motel Season 2, Episode 9, The Box. This is a great setup episode for the season finale, and one of the greatest things about it is what's going to happen in the season finale from some of the inconclusive things that took place in this episode. One of the biggest things is the fact that what Nick Ford wanted didn't really happen in the 24 hours that he gave. And Norman's fate is still left in the balance. Unfortunately, the one big thing that was sort of spoiled by the preview for the season finale is the fact that he does just escape the box. But that was to be expected in some fashion, so I am still very curious as to how he escaped. And odds are Dylan does end up finding him just wandering around, or he captures somebody else, or one of the three guys that took Norman out of the box towards the middle of the episode. He finds one of them and they tell him where the box is and how to get Norman out. But it was a great episode that ultimately led to one of the greatest revelations that have really taken place in the show, which is Norman figuring out what he has done and figuring out what happens to him when he blacks out. That's when he attacks people and he loses his mind and sort of channels his mother and does things that he sort of makes up a super over amplified version of his mother, who always has these opinions about people and how they shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. And he even sees his mother, which I don't think they did too much in this season. I think they really only did that in season 1, where he would actually see her when she wasn't there. But he did something much crazier in this season, I believe, when her brother came to town and he was basically her. And I thought that was even crazier than just seeing her in the room when she wasn't. He was actually her mentally, and I thought that's even crazier. But they went through the whole flashback of what happened between him and his teacher, and he realized that he actually killed her, and it freaked him out. He was like screaming inside this box, and he had no idea he was a murderer this whole time. So it was a great revelation at the end of the episode where he now understands what he's been doing. And I'm sure it'll come up a lot in the next episode when he is actually talking to his mother at the scene that was in the preview, where he realizes why she wouldn't tell him. And she kind of has to admit it. Either she'll deny it again, or she'll admit, this is why I didn't tell you, because I didn't want to scare you and I didn't want you to ruin your life and go telling people that when you black out, you murder people. That's insane, and you will go to prison for that. But I'm very curious to see how that sort of plays out in the season finale. But that was like just one half of the story, and then the other half is Norma trying to figure out how to convince Dylan to do what Nick Ford wants and how to save her son, while also trying to protect Norman from Romero, who tells her everything about Norman being the other person who is identified with Norman's teacher. I just can't think of her name for some reason, but Miss Ford. And that scene I thought was really good too, because it was probably the worst moment that Norma could have possibly found out about that, because her son's already been kidnapped. She's found out that Nick Ford took her son. She has no idea how to get him back outside of talking to Dylan, and she's not entirely sure how that's going to work out either. And then she finds out that it's almost confirmed that her son is the killer, and that's what she thought this entire time, is that he was there. He has no idea what happened, and she never really believed that he was just in the rain and he told her no and he just ran home. She never believed that to begin with, because she knows that he blacks out, and it almost confirmed all of her thoughts and suspicions about Norman and what happened that night. And it was just a great scene, and it sort of broke her down, and she freaked out, because now that Romero knows this secret, it could lead to Norman going to prison and being taken away from her and having his life completely ruined for being a murderer. Although, of course, she has no idea that Romero really just wants to know the truth, because even if he finds out that Norman actually did it, I don't think he's going to tell him, because when he had the scene in the beginning of the episode where he talked to his father's old partner, he asked him to do it off the books because he really just wants to know. He's almost just so curious that nothing else matters to him. He already put the one guy away who he flat out said himself it wasn't exactly right, but that guy deserved it because of all the crap that he did. But now that he has that answer, or he has evidence that sort of sprouts all of these questions in his head. He just has to know the answer to it as to what Norman did with his teacher, whether or not they were just together or whether or not he is actually the person who killed her. And I I have no idea what's going to take place in the season finale, but I'm really excited to see how all that crazy stuff works out. And it should be really good. I think there are going to be a lot of elements in the season finale that take place that may or may not actually be resolved this season. I think most of the stuff is going to be resolved, but I think one of the biggest things that's going to lead to what we can expect for season 2 is actually the stuff going on with the drug world, because in this episode when Dylan goes to see Nick Ford, I'm pretty sure that he's dead. He wasn't moving or anything like that, and there was just blood coming out of his mouth. At first, I thought Dylan like cut his throat when he swung at him, but he just like hit him in the mouth or something. But either he's knocked out or he's just flat out dead. And the way they did it with his eyes just wide open and blood pouring out, I have to assume that Nick Ford has died in this episode. So Zane is actually safe. He's perfectly fine. Dylan couldn't take him out because, of course, he had his security. So when he went to do it, he couldn't. So he went to talk to Nick Ford, and now that he's technically killed him, in a way, it does solve the whole drug problem, but it might not exactly solve everything, because I'm sure that with their leader taken out, somebody in Nick Ford's organization is going to decide we need to retaliate, even if we don't have a leader. We need to take somebody out and go kill a bunch of people on their side. So it could actually continue into season 3 and not just the season 2 finale. But even if all of that does wrap up, which I don't think it will as far as Dylan's story goes, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And I'd love to see them sort of leave us with a cliffhanger, because I was very curious with the way season 1 ended. That really did wrap up. They didn't do that like a normal TV show does, where it'll end a certain way and it'll be like, oh, what's going to happen with these people or that people. They just wrapped up that season very tightly, and that was it. So if this show didn't end up in this second season, it could have ended perfectly right there. There would have, of course, been some things that didn't really get to carry on, like Dylan working in the drug world and all the other storylines that happened, and them actually finding out that Norman killed his teacher. Sure, that stuff wouldn't have been told, but it did wrap up very well. And I'm hoping that since this show has really picked up in popularity since that first season, that we do get a more typical ending this season, where it ends and it wraps up sort of the overarching story, but it does give us sort of a great cliffhanger by the end of the episode. And even if it doesn't, I'm sure there will be something in the show that can just naturally carry on, like Dylan working in the drug world. That's not just going to disappear because he killed Nick Ford. That's going to keep going, and it's going to have a huge ripple effect as to what his people do and how high they are in the rankings, and whether or not they decide to actually spread out to Nick Ford's territory now that he's been killed off, if someone doesn't decide to take over for him, if he doesn't have kids and stuff to take over what appeared to be like just a giant freaking farm that he owned, just a mansion and then farmland for miles and acres. So if someone doesn't decide to just take all of that over, they're gonna like storm all that territory and figure out some crazy stuff to do and take over all his territory and get all of the drug money that he would normally get and his organization normally takes in. So even if they don't do the whole typical cliffhanger thing, that type of progression is going to be very natural for the show. And also, depending on what happens with Norman, as far as him telling his mother and Romero actually learning whether or not he killed his teacher, that can naturally carry on too, as far as Romero and Norman's mother basically just changing in general, and both knowing this huge secret. It would change how they interact with each other, because even though they might not know at the same time that each other knows, that could carry on into season 3 once again, and that's a big storyline. They'd find out like, hey, I knew this, and you decided, Norma would basically talk to Romero and say, you decided to protect my son, even though you knew that it was really suspicious, or flat out that he did kill his teacher. So we'll have to wait and see, but this was definitely a great episode. I love Norman being in that box was really interesting. I just thought he's just out in these woods in this metal box, and he's just there. And then what didn't end up becoming a huge part of the episode like I thought it would was actually Nick Ford um, finding the necklace and the piece of newspaper that was in Norman's pocket. I thought that was going to happen really early on, and then it would be a huge component for the episode. But it happened towards the middle, and even when he found out, he didn't actually like go to Norman, even though it kind of would have given him away. But obviously Norman knew, so it's not like it would matter if Norman did or not. Because if Norman went back to his mother, she would have been like, it was Nick Ford. So it wouldn't matter whether or not Nick Ford actually went to Norman. But I thought he was gonna see this necklace, see the paper, and he was gonna think maybe this kid killed my daughter, and he was just there because he's weird or psycho or something, which he is. And then they were gonna have a really intense confrontation, but that never happens, and it probably won't now because I'm pretty sure he's dead. But even though I wish that did happen, I guess someone could still find that necklace and piece of paper because, of course, Dylan didn't find it, and it's still just in that house. And the guy knew, like, everybody obviously knows who Nick Ford's daughter was. So if that paper is still in his house, which it is, someone else could easily just pick up that piece of newspaper and that necklace and know this kid Norman has something to do with his teacher. Either he was just crazy and he was infatuated with her, or he somehow got this necklace, which I thought how they were really gonna play it was that one necklace was gonna just happen to be a gift that Nick Ford gave to his daughter. So it wasn't like, oh, she might have lost this or dropped it or gave it to Norman for whatever random reason. He was gonna know that Norman had to have taken it or stolen it from her house, and why would he do that? So I thought that's how it would play out, but once again, it hasn't. It still could in the season finale from one of the many characters we don't even know exist in this world yet. They could just pick it up and sort of run with that, and that could carry into season 3. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see until the season finale. But great episode. Comment below, let me know what you guys thought of it. Favorite parts, least favorite parts. And technically, this video is done. The season finale came on tonight for me. I've been a week behind in this show since it started, pretty much. But I'm gonna have to wait till tomorrow to actually see the season finale, unfortunately, because I don't have the channel right now, and I can't just stream it online because it came on like hours ago. But what do you guys want to see in the season finale? And if you're watching this way later for some reason, what were you right about for the season finale? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.